Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, welcome. Let's see. It's my chat window. Share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So now I can see your screen. Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody can tell me how the quality of the videos are? I mean, is the audio okay? Can you understand the videos that are being recorded? Any comments? All good? Okay, awesome.
Hello, Professor.
Hi, yes.
I have a quick question regarding the quiz for tomorrow. Since we're covering CSS today, is the quiz still going to include Bootstrap tomorrow?
No, tomorrow is just HTML.
For the quiz?
Yeah, only HTML.
Yeah, because on Canvas it's posted as HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap.
Oh, okay, that's the name of the quiz, but okay. All right, the name, it's supposed to be just only HTML.
All right, thank you.
I've also got another question about the quiz. So is it next, so it's tomorrow, is it during the beginning of class that we have to take it, or can we take it at any point once it opens?
Right at the beginning of quiz. I'm going to have a poll, see if there's a better time where every single person is available, or at least the great majority. I'm not quite sure. It might be that only half of everybody will be available tomorrow. If I can find a specific time where it's just for the quiz, where everybody can meet for half an hour. I'm gonna ask everybody, if we can't find any other time where everybody's available, then we'll just leave it for tomorrow. But if I can find something maybe on Friday or Wednesday or sometime even perhaps earlier or a little later, where I can get maybe 90+% of every single person available, then I'd rather do that.
Do we need everyone together if we're just taking it on Canvas?
Well,
or?
the concern is that if folks have questions about the quiz or about a particular question on and somebody needs a explanation, right? If you take it on your own, then you won't be able to ask questions. So
okay, that makes sense.
That's my concern.
Nice, thank you.
So the format of the quiz will be mostly just fill in the blanks, or it'll be multiple choices. So I'll give you a snippet of code in HTML, and I'll ask you, fill in the blanks to give it a particular ID, give it a particular placeholder, or a particular value, or associate an input field with a label, or I'll give you some multiple choices on, if say I want to lay out something in columns, right? What would I do? Would I use tables? What would I use? Things like that. Can we reference our prior work? Yeah, it's open book. So any slides that you want to have open, that's totally fine. Just I would just become very familiar where everything is, and so you can find it quickly. It is a very quick quiz, and it's like 20 minutes. So you should be able to answer them right at the top of your head. Also, there'll be some acronyms. So, for instance, I might ask you, what does HTML stand for? What does CSS stand for? What does DOM stand for? Any acronyms that we might have gone through, please make sure that you know what it means. There will be a time limit where it'll be 20 minutes, and then the quiz will automatically close. All right. Can everybody please mute? I still hear somebody in the background. Let's see, how can I mute everybody? Pause, hide, full subtitles. Not sure how to mute everybody. Xiang Wang, can you mute? Maybe that's that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, excellent. Welcome everyone. Sorry I had to change the class for tonight. I couldn't make it yesterday. So let's see. Let's take a look at where we are in the syllabus. Let's see. We're getting started on week number 3, and so by now we should have a working environment where we have a React.js application running on our machine, and we've been playing around with HTML, just learning the basics of some of the more common HTML elements, such as tables and headings, paragraphs, lists, also form elements that we can create input fields and drop downs for folks to interact with those buttons to enact some actions and whatnot, right? So we should have this working environment, and we're going to be building on that, right? You should be about done with the second assignment, which gives you a chance to play around with HTML that is due, I believe, on the 23rd, so that'll give you a chance to practice using that. So as you might have noticed, as you build the in the second assignment, the Twitter clone, right? It's not quite easy using HTML to make things look pretty, right? Or make them look any particular way, right? So HTML is mostly for laying out the content, right? So displaying the content and saying that that things should appear near each other, and you can give them identifiers, and you can associate classes and how things are related to one another logically, right? That things are contained inside of other things and whatnot, right? But to make things look pretty, we really need styling, CSS. So we're going to spend this week discussing styling, and we're going to be introducing a new language today. It's called CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, which is used for styling web pages, right? It allows you to refer to content on the page and decide what it should look like, right? That I want headings to be green and the foreground to be yellow, and I want things to lay out not horizontally but vertically. I want to be able to style, default stylings. I like to change the font. I like to do all sorts of things. So we're going to be spending 1 week playing around with CSS. Okay. As some of your colleagues were pointing out, we do have a quiz tomorrow. I am going to have a poll go out later tonight asking, see if there's a better time where everybody will be able, where everybody is more available. Ideally, I can get perhaps 90% of everybody that can be at the quiz at the same time, just in case somebody has a question and myself or TA can answer those questions right away, as opposed to perhaps, half the class taking the quiz one time and half the class taking it in some other time. So let's see if we can find a time where we can all agree, at least for the quiz. And if not, we'll do our best and perhaps have most of you take the quiz tomorrow. And if you can't make it tomorrow, then perhaps the TA, you can take it at a time where the TA is available. Yeah, so you see, check out for that poll later tonight. And again, the assignment is due on 23rd. That's what is that a Friday, right? What day is today? 22. No, tomorrow. Due tomorrow midnight. So today we're going to introduce the third assignment, A3, which is going to focus on CSS. Giving you a chance to play around with CSS. Okay, and that'll be due a week from tomorrow. All right, so that's the plan for the next couple of days. Let's take a look at the material. All right, so here's the main set of slides. Although, as you might have noticed, I use a lot the assignments as a means for teaching and demonstrating what it is that we're working on, and then we do some live coding together. And if you want, you can take the code that I'm giving you, which is already digested. It's already there, line by line. I'm telling you exactly what to do. That portion will be part of your practice. And then once you have a chance to do that practice, you can then have a chance to do it on your own, right? Working on the Twitter clone, right? Where I don't walk you through line by line, instead I give you some requirements, and then you try to use what you just learned to achieve those requirements. Okay. So anyway, so let's discuss CSS. Right, can everybody see my screen? Everybody can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, great, thank you. All right, hopefully presenting the slide won't have the same problems we had last week. Yeah, so CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Yeah, Cascading Style Sheets, right? So HTML, before, when HTML just came out, right, it had elements that described the location of content, right? The actual content, and it already provides some styling. By styling, I mean that perhaps some text should be bigger than others. Some text should be underlined, other ones should be bold. Perhaps you can choose different fonts. Maybe you want something that is centered on the screen, right? And early on, there was no CSS, and the styling was actually achieved by dedicated HTML tags, right? So for instance, if you wanted something underlined, we had the U tag, right? And you put your text, you surround your text with a U tag, and that's underlined. If you wanted bold, then you put your text, you surrounded it with the B tag, bold, right? Those tags are still around, right? But we have abandoned that way of styling our texts, right? We'll still have some minor styling. For instance, we use headings for heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. That's a form of styling, right? Where you have big headings with a bold, huge text, right? That goes smaller and smaller as you used H2, H3, H4, and so on and so forth. We have paragraphs, right? So we use paragraphs to add some vertical spacing, right? So we use lists, right, to add bullets and whatnot. Okay, so that there is some minor styling that happens just with the basic HTML elements, right? But the real styling of making things look professional and look, finished products, whatnot, really happens with CSS. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can use CSS. So again, CSS is a language, and it's a complete different language, totally separate from HTML. And so here's an example, right? One way to use the CSS language is to use the tag, the attribute style. See that? This paragraph over here has an attribute style that says that the foreground color of this text, right? So this is a paragraph, the content right there. Oops, put this on the side. Wait, right? The text over here is the foreground is going to be green, right? Wait a minute. This little thing where the do you see this this text showing over here? The transcript. This transcript is like above all the rest of the content. It just bugs me. I can't touch the screen. Okay. Can it go make it go away? No. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so we can style this paragraph here, and we can show that the foreground color we want it to be green. So we can say style equal, and then in the quotes we could use CSS attributes, right? Where we can say, you know, this property color has going to have the value green, right? And color is just one of many properties that you can change. Okay, you can change the foreground color, the background color. You can declare an image that is showing behind it. You can define whether things are centered, horizontally, vertically, and things like that. Okay, and you can provide here any number of properties, one after another: property value, property value, property values, and you separate them with semicolons, right? So we say property colon value, semicolon, property colon value, semicolon, and so on and so forth, right? So here we just have one property, color green. So this would render as green. Alternatively, right, we can use what is called the style tag. There's a dedicated style tag, right, where you can put all your transformations here, where you can say that, hey, that paragraph over there, you can reference and say all the paragraphs, the following transformations I want to happen. I want to change the text alignment, right, to be centered, and then all paragraphs are going to be, the text is going to be centered. Okay. Alternatively, you can use instead declare all your styles in a completely separate file, right, completely outside of the current HTML document, right? And in there, in that CSS style, you can put all these rules over here, right, where you want all the paragraphs to be in a certain style and whatnot. Okay. Now this over here, this style attribute is I would say has the is the style that is closest, right, to the element. See that? Right? It's right on the element, right? It's declared right on the element. You're saying this particular paragraph has the color green. All right. And so it's very convenient, right? Nevertheless, right, it's a bad practice. Do not use this technique, right? Do not apply styles right on the element. Okay. The reason is a bad practice is that, you know, if tomorrow, you know, we're asked to change all the paragraphs to make them red, okay, then that means, and I don't know, we have a pretty big website, and you know, with hundreds of web pages. Well, I would have to find every single paragraph, right, in my 100 plus pages, and go change the style on every single paragraph, right? So that makes it a maintenance nightmare. So do not do that. You know, you will lose points, right, if you have styles right on the paragraph, on the elements. A slightly better solution is to use the style tag. At least here's where you would put all your rules, right? All your CSS rules, right? That this paragraph is this color and that other paragraph, blah, blah, blah. You have one style tag and you declare all your rules there, all your transformations, right? Because CSS is a transformation language. It's a language that transforms the look and feel, right, or properties of a document, right, from some default properties, right? It modifies them and transforms them into another set of properties. Okay, so it's referred to sometimes as a transformation language, and the syntax of this here, where you have here the tag, right, and then the properties that are applied, we call that the rule. There's a CSS rule that gets triggered right? Whenever the browser parses the HTML document and then finds these patterns, right? And whenever it matches, right? Whenever it finds a paragraph, it applies that rule. Okay. So anyway, so this is a little better. At least it's not, all these rules are not spread across, the entire document, right? At least they're in one place in that one page. But still, this is also considered to be bad practice. Okay. Again, if tomorrow somebody asks me that we're going to change all the paragraphs to be red, I still have to open up, hundreds of documents and make the changes on every document, right? So none of these two, either on the style attribute or the style tag, are considered to be good practice. I mean, you can use them just to play around and just to see how it works and whatnot. Very good, just to play around with it, but not in production document code, right? So instead, we're going to use this technique, right? We're going to have all our styles live in a separate document, okay? And then we're going to load it, right? We're going to link it, right, and associate it to this HTML document. Okay. The great thing about this is that the document itself is not declaring any styles. Instead, it's delegating that job to a separate document, right? And if you have the 100 documents reference the same exact CSS file, well, that's great, right? I have a single place where I can make my changes of my style, and then boom, the entire website is updated with those styles. Make sense? So definitely that's a much better option, right? It's very good for it becomes the maintenance now becomes much easier. Okay. All right, so let's look at a couple examples of using the style attribute, right? So for instance, here we have the style attribute. Style attributes configure, look and feel, blah, 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 and it's considered a bad practice, right? Don't use it. Nevertheless, here's an example. Here we have 3 paragraphs, and we're applying style background color yellow. This one we're applying background color blue, and this one background color red. Here we're applying two transformations. For the blue one, we're saying that the background color is blue, semicolon, color is white. Color is the foreground color, whereas the background color is the background color. Okay, let's see, any questions on the chat? What if we have different pages with different styles? Yeah, so what you would do is perhaps you would declare multiple links. Yeah, that's a good question, right? So you could have multiple links, right? And so where you first declare the style sheets that are common to all pages, right? And then each page could have a dedicated style sheet, right? That only applies to that one style, to that one page, right? So that's a good practice. So ideally, usually we have a first link that references some maybe a library, a style library that we purchased, that we're paying for, and that some third-party folks generated, or we paid for, or we purchased it. Then we have a local style sheets that can override or tweak that style sheet that we purchased, and then other links that load style sheets that are specific to any one page. Okay. All right. Awesome. Let's keep going. Good questions. Excellent. Yeah. So here's an example of using CSS. The text in here between the quotes, right? This is CSS. This is CSS. Okay. And these transformations where you have background color blue and color white is being applied to the paragraph, the content in there. So this is how it renders, right? This paragraph is yellow. This paragraph is blue with white text. That's the text right here, right? This paragraph is red and white. Okay. Okay. So alternatively, right? Instead of declaring the style right, the CSS right on the element, alternative what we could do is to move all those transformations, put them in the style tag. So this is slightly better, but it's still a bad practice. Okay. So the way this would work is that, yeah, if I move, right, if I move all these transformations, right, here it's clear that this transformation is applied to this paragraph, right? And here this transformation is applied to the paragraph it belongs to. But once I move these transformations outside, right? Once I move them outside over here, well, now how do we know, right? How do we know which transformations apply to which elements down here? Well, CSS is doesn't only it's not only for declaring transformations, but also declaring what are called selectors. See this on this left-hand side? This left-hand side binds these rules, right, to the elements that they apply to. Okay, so these selectors have their own syntax, right? How is it that this refers to that, right? Well, it works as follows. Notice that here we have in the paragraph we have class equal background yellow. See that? Okay. Well, then, and notice that this one says background yellow as well. Right? And notice that it has a dot in front of it. See that? Dot. So dot means that the following, right, the following text is a class. Okay. And that this transformation applies to any element that has this class. Okay, this class. And multiple elements can have the same class. For instance, notice over here, this dot color white, right? That makes the foreground color white. See that? Well, notice that paragraph, the blue paragraph and the red paragraph, both of them have class color white. See that? Applied to it. That means that both of them are going to receive the foreground color white. But they also have the class background blue and background red, each one. See that? So that means that this transformation rule where the background is blue is going to be applied to this blue over here, whereas the red transformation is going to be applied to the one below. Okay, and the yellow one is only applied to this one. Make sense? All right. So there's a whole world here on how these selectors work, right? We just looked at just one of them, which is using the dot and then the name of the class, right? Which applies to this class. Everybody good? All right. Yeah, so much more to come about selectors. All right, so alternatively, we just said that the attribute is a bad practice, the element, style element is a bad practice. So what do? So the best practice is to instead declare all your rules, the same rules you would have in a style tag, just like this one, right? Identical, but move them into a separate file. Okay, there it is. So in a separate file called style.css, right, we have the rules, the same exact rules, but instead of declaring them now in our HTML document, right, instead of declaring it in the style attribute, we declare it in a dedicated link, right, element that can reference the file, the style CSS file. There it is. See that? It's referenced that style. Okay. But you also have to say that the relationship, or REL, the relationship between this HTML document and that style document needs to be interpreted as a style sheet. Okay. The link is a generic element that allows you to link other resources, right? And those resources can be all sorts of things. Okay. In particular, we're going to be using style CSS resources. Okay. All right. So this would work exactly the same way as before, right? You get the same 3 paragraphs with those 3 colors. All right. Everybody good? Right. Yeah. So from now on for the entire lecture, for the entire for the entire course, you're expected to only use this technique. Okay.
I just had a question.
Yes.
So we talked about possibly having multiple CSS files. So how do you know, like say there's 2 files with different background yellows where one has like say black font and one has white font? I mean, obviously it's probably best practice. Like, I don't know, is that something that an IDE would be able to tell you?
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, these rules can collide, right? And we often either deliberately avoid the collision, or sometimes we deliberately encourage the collision, right? Where, for instance, you might purchase a library that declares all your buttons to be rounded corners, right? and you like most of the style, right? You like the fonts, you like the colors, the color scheme, you like that. You just don't like the fact that the style sheet that you purchased for $300, right, is making all your buttons with rounded corners, right? Well, you can override that. You can say, oh, what is the rule that is triggering this, right? And you can find exactly the rule that is in the style sheet because you purchased it. And so what you could do is that you then declare your own CSS file that gets declared later, right, in the order, in the document order, right? And basically the rule is that last one wins, right? If you have two rules that are colliding and they don't agree, right, then the last one, the one that is closest to the element, right, in document order, is the one who beats out the other ones. In general, you know, these collisions, you want to make sure that they are deliberate, meaning you know that you know it's happening and you meant to do that. You should try to always avoid having collisions that are not meant to be. That it might be by error. Okay, you should always make sure that you understand what are, you know, what collisions, and the browser will tell you, right, whenever you see an element and you hover over it and use the inspector, it'll show you what all the rules that are being applied to that element. And you can see that some of the rules might be colliding, and that which one is winning over the other. That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's good to know that it won't cause like the rendering to be. It'll just take whatever's the
well, the last one.
Okay.
But it might
Yeah.
not be what you meant, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
You just have to be aware of it.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All right, so let's talk about some really basic stuff, right, in CSS, like for instance, just simple colors. Okay. So the simplest thing that we could do is change the foreground color. And here, for instance, we're changing the here we have H1 basic styling. There it is, basic styling. There it is, right? And you have a paragraph, and the paragraph says text can be colored and styled to be bold, italic, or underlined. And there it is. Notice that the whole paragraph has the style color blue, and there it is. It's blue, the whole paragraph. Very good.
Professor,
Yes.
what should we be seeing on the screen?
Oh, foreground color.
So we're still at link element.
Uh-oh. Okay. Yep, there. I see Zoom crashed. All right. Let me restart the meeting. I'll be right back. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. What's up with the Zoom? Okay, so here we have a foreground color, right? So there's some really basic styling where we can change the color of the paragraph, right? We have here the heading saying basic color. There it is, basic styling. And then a paragraph declared below that is declared the style to be the foreground color is blue, right? And there it is, right? The text, notice that it is indeed blue, right? We can also change the background color, right? We can apply not only the transformations that the foreground color is blue, but the background color is yellow. And there it is, right? My text of the paragraph, now the whole paragraph is blue on yellow, right? We can, now there's some styling that is kind of legacy styling, the way you could apply styling without CSS. For instance, with tags, the bold tag, the italic tag, and the underline tag, right? This is instead of using CSS, and this is how you used to do it before CSS, right? Really, really early on when HTML just came out, there was no CSS, right? And we would use dedicated tags to do this, right? We should not do that anymore, right? They're not, you should not use it with that intention. Instead, you should exclusively use CSS for styling your content, okay? We can also play around with fonts, right? So for instance, here, we can take text and maybe not the whole text, right? Here the text is, text can be colored and styled. There it is, right? And we might have the rest of the content to be bold, italic, or underlined, right? Notice that what we're doing here is that we are wrapping the text. The text can be bolded, colored, and styled. We're wrapping it with a new tag that we haven't covered yet. It's called the span tag. See that? The span tag, we're using it to wrap the text, right? Notice that it opens here. This is the opening tag, right? That's the closing tag here, and that's the text, right? And in the opening tag, we have the style attribute where we're saying that we're changing the font to be bold. We're changing the font to be Courier, so you can change different font style, font families. You can change to be Courier, Arial, Verdana, any Times New Roman or whatever, right? And you can, there's any number of families of fonts that you can apply there, right? And you can also set the font size to be specifically by how many pixels did you want it. So here we made it just a little bit bigger, 20 pixels big. Okay. The span tag, what it does is that just allows you to kind of grab a piece of text and basically don't do anything to it, right? It allows you to group together the text, and it will render the same, right? It will flow with the rest of the text like it normally does, so it doesn't change the flow of the text, right? But what it allows you to do is allows you to refer to the whole text as if it were one thing, right? So that's what we're doing here, right? We are grabbing this piece of text, right, and changing the font for that piece of text. Okay. All right, the box model. Hold on a second. Yeah, hold on a second. It's getting really hot in this room. Just a second. Okay, back. All right, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so yeah, so what the browser does, right, is that whenever it's parsing the content, right, the HTML content, it's basically looking at all these paragraphs and headings and all these tags, and it's calculating, where am I going to put all this, right? It needs to find, based on whether the tag is rendering from left to right and it's adding vertical spacing or horizontal spacing. It needs to calculate the position of every single element on the screen. Okay. So for instance, it knows that the heading tag behaves that it takes up the entire width of the screen, and then it needs to move things vertically down, right? Same thing with the paragraph, right? All the content inside, right? It adds vertical spacing, right? And it stretches across the page, right? So it calculates, a rectangular space, right, for every single element that is going to display on the screen. Yes? Okay. So to be able to calculate that, all those spaces, the location, how far things are from each other, what is the spacing between the letters, and how much spacing there is between the each rectangle, it uses what is called the box model, right? So everything you see on screen, right, has a little box around it, okay, of some width and height, but it also has, how far is it from the next word, right? So for instance, what's the distance between this B and this L, and what's the distance between this word block and the word AS? What's the spacing in between that? What's the spacing between and vertically, right? So all that is calculated using the box model, right? Now the box model uses two main policies to calculate where to put stuff on the screen. One of them is the policy of the block elements. Some elements are render as blocks, and what we mean by that is that they extend the entire width of the screen, right? And whatever doesn't fit gets pushed down vertically, right? And we've seen examples of that, right? For instance, the headings, right? The paragraphs, divs, they all behave that way, right? The heading takes up the entire width and everything else is pushed down. Same thing with paragraphs. Paragraphs allow you to put more text inside, right? But it creates a block, expands the whole width, and then it pushes everything outside of the paragraph, pushes it down, right? That's block element. Inline elements are the policy of inline element is that text will normally flow from left to right and from top to bottom, right? And that it will just flow from left to right as marching from left to right until there's no more space, and then it'll just wrap, right, and continue in the next line, right? So some elements behave like that, like a word, or every character behaves that way, right? There's a character, then there's the next character, and then the next character from left to right, and then there's words also, right? Every word is inline. There's a word, and then followed by another word, followed by another word, and so on and so forth, right? And then when there's no more, it just wraps. But there's other elements that behave the same way, right? Definitely text, but input fields, buttons, spans, right? All behave this way, right? If you put a whole bunch of input fields in a form, they will render from left to right, and there's no more space, it'll just wrap. Same thing if I put a whole bunch of buttons, right? They'll be one after another until there's no more, and then it just wraps around, okay? So those are the two main policies that the browser uses to calculate what to put where on the screen. Okay. In addition to that, every rectangle, every word, every button, right, every paragraph, every heading, right, has associated around it, right, a box like this, okay, where you have the main content, right, and this might be an entire paragraph, right? This might be an entire paragraph. Then you have padding. So padding is an internal spacing, right? There's a box around your content, right? And it defines how much space is there, between the outside rectangle and the inner content. Like for instance, this here, see this space between the edge of the text here and the edge of the screen, right? That's typically referred to as a padding. How much padding is there between the actual text, right, and the surrounding box? Make sense? Okay. And so we have some padding at the top and some padding on the right, padding on the left, and some padding at the bottom, right? And it makes things look prettier, right? I mean, imagine if this were flush with the left-hand side, it would kind of look funny, right? So padding makes things look a little neater, right? Then there's border, and border is, right, if we had an with that outer rectangle, right, around your content, you can decide what kind of border do you want, right? You can have all sorts of borders. You can set the color, you can set how wide, how big and thick the border is. You can just choose the kind of styling that you want, whether you want to dot it, right, or solid or beveled, right? There's a whole bunch of types of borders, and we'll play around with that a little bit. And then margin is the overall spacing between the elements, right? So if you have multiple elements, right, each one with its own box, how far apart are they, right? So how far am I, my left, my right, above me, below me, and you can have an entire spacing that pushes us away from each other. Okay. Yeah. So let's play around with some of this. Yeah. So first of all, let's play around with let's see, right, the fact that certain things are inline and some things are box are block, right? So for instance, H1, we knew already that it behaves like a block, right? Or an inline. So there it is, it's block. It expands the entire width of the screen, right? And its content inside is just plain text, and the text still behaves inline, right? So it defines the outer box, right? And the inside text still behaves inline. Same thing with paragraph. Notice that it takes up the entire width of the screen, right? And then it pushes elements above and below vertically. Okay. Normal text is rendering just like regular inline. There it is. Notice the normal text renders inline, right? And then there's my text span elements. Span elements render inline with the rest of the content. See that? Okay, notice that BR, we are adding some breaks, right? We have, otherwise the content would just render from left to right, and flow in the same line, right? What span does, span allows us to keep the inline behavior, right? It doesn't add any vertical spacing. Notice that this text span elements, there it is, span elements. Notice that even though we surrounded it with a span element, notice that it just keeps flowing from left to right, right? It doesn't add any vertical spacing, unlike the paragraph. The paragraph did add vertical spacing. Same thing with the heading, right? The text, notice that it doesn't flow along with the paragraph, right? Whereas here we have the span elements flows right before just to render inline, right? In the same line, okay? There's let's see, we notice that the span allows us to reference some of the text, like the span elements, right there, span elements. And we can play around with it, right? We can say, notice that originally we had changed the background color to be red and the foreground color to be white, okay? There it is, right? Background color to be red, there it is, right? And the foreground color to be white. Well, now I want to illustrate that we can change the border, right? The border. So we can change the border by changing its style. We can change its width. We can change its color, right? And there's attributes dedicated for each one of those attributes, right? The style, the width, and the color separately, just like this. Or there is a more less verbose style, right? Of instead of breaking up this style, each one of the attributes in individual lines, you can put it in a single line border, and you can provide the values, all three values, all at once. Okay. All right. Any questions? And notice that we have green all around, right? We have the same exact result. All right, so let's keep going. Notice that here, let's play around with margins, right? Margins, if you remember, margins describe how far an element is from its sibling elements, any other elements that are around it, right? So for instance, what we're doing here is margin on the paragraph. You go back, notice that this heading and this paragraph and the text, right, are all in line. See that? Okay. And there's some spacing between the heading and some spacing between the text down below, right? Well, I can change that, how much spacing it is there is all around us, right? By saying, for instance, margin 10. See that? Margin 10. So what I've done here, notice that now there's a little spacing on my left. There's a little more spacing on the right, below me, above me, and on the right as well. Notice that there's a little spacing here, where this ends here. See that? So margin allows me to specify that the margin above, below, left, and right, it's all 10 pixels. Or, right, I can specify individually, right? I can specify the margin on my right, margin on my left, above, and below. Here, this span over here, what I've done is that I've changed the span on the right-hand side to be 10 pixels. So there's a little more space in between over here, right? I am pushing away from whatever is on my right. Notice that before there was some spacing, right? But I can specify that spacing. This is the default spacing. Here I am overriding that spacing, right? I'm pushing away, right, 10 pixels away. Okay. Padding, right? Padding, as I mentioned earlier, right? It's the inner space right, of the surrounding box. Notice that we're playing around with the padding of our paragraph, and I'm putting 10 pixel padding all around me. Okay, notice that before we didn't have any padding. See that? The text was completely flush with the surrounding box. Okay, but I can change that by setting the padding, right, to be 10, 20, 30, how much ever space I want. Notice how it looks a little better, right? It looks a little cleaner. So when it's not flush like this, see that? So if I use just the word padding, I'm setting all around me all that space, right? Or I can specify exactly where I want it, right? Maybe I only want it to my left or above me. So just like I did with the span, I'm adding some spacing, inner spacing with the on the left hand side, inner spacing above me with the left and top, but I'm not putting anything on my right. I'm not putting anything at the bottom, right? So that's why it stays the way it was, right? Unchanged with the default. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. So let's play around with position and size and dimensions. Okay. All right, so let's start first with declaring just a couple of paragraphs, right? A yellow paragraph and a blue paragraph, right? There they are. So now let's play around with their size. Right now, they're using the default size, and the size is given by their block or inline behavior, right? So if you're a block, right, the default size is that you're going to take up the entire width of the screen, basically 100%. Right, that's default behavior, right? That's the horizontal height, right? And the vertical height will be determined on how much stuff, how much content do you have, right? If my paragraphs were longer, right, my vertical size, my vertical height would be bigger, right? It will expand to fit whatever we have internally, right? So that's how block elements behave, right? The width is given by the parent window or whatever parent element. That's the width, 100%. That's the default, and the height, right, will expand, right, to fit whatever's inside, right? That's the basic gist of it, right? So both these two paragraphs are behaving that way, right? The width, they're taking up the entire width, right, and they're growing vertically to fit whatever is inside. Okay, well, but we can override that, right? Because these are the default width and the default height. So how do we change that? So the way we change that is by specifying the width. There it is, width 100 pixels. Okay, right? Notice that we have only specified the width, right? That means that, it used to be 100%, right? Whatever the width of the screen was. Now we are limiting it to be only 100 pixels. Yes, but notice that the height, I haven't said anything about the height. So the height will still behave in auto, right? This, the initial value of the height is auto. Auto mean, let the browser decide what to do with it. Okay, and right now the behavior is that it will expand to fit the inner content. Okay, right. So both of these paragraphs are behaving that way. Both of them are 100 pixel wide, but the height is in auto. Okay, or I can override it. I can say no, it's not going to be 100 the whatever you want it to be. I am explicitly telling you what you should be, right? So here in this case, I'm overriding it. I'm giving you a height of 80 pixels. Notice that it's more than I need, right? Probably could have gotten away with just 60 pixels was enough for to hold the internal content. Okay. Whereas this one, I went a little bit too low. It's 30 pixels. It's not enough to fit my entire content. Notice that the content is being clipped. Okay. Now there are other style attributes, other CSS that allow you to specify what do you want to happen when you don't have enough space, right? You could say, well, it's just going to be clipped, right? Like over here, you don't see the content. You could say that it'll just spill over, right? So the background will still be small, but whatever spills over will still show off, right? You can say, for instance, oh, I want if it doesn't fit, then give me a scroll bar, right? So I can scroll the content. I go up and down so I can still see the content, right? So you can specify what is it that you want to do when the inner content is bigger than the outer shell. right? But we haven't looked at that yet, right? All right. So okay, so we just played around with the dimensions, right? The width, the height. What about the position? So the position, right, by default is determined by whether you're block or whether you're inline, right? If you're block, right, you'll just your position will be determined of your document order, right? So you know, if things are pushing you down because they're above you, your position will just go below you, right? So for instance, this heading, right, is pushing down. This heading up here is pushing down the position, the vertical position of this paragraph. It will be determined by what this rectangle will decide where it wants to fall on the screen. And then it'll decide where the beginning vertical position of the paragraph is, right? The horizontal position will be determined by, you know, any margins, any paddings of the outer content, outer shell, the outer window will give you the offset of where do you begin in X. Yes. Anyways, that's the default behavior. Well, you can override that. You can say, no. I want you to have a different position, right? I want you to say, for instance, what I can do is that I can use the position attribute to change the behavior on how you calculate your position, right? By default, position is auto, right? Just do whatever you need to do. But we can change that by overriding the value of position. We can say position relative, right? And what relative does is it says that, you know, wherever you fall, right, wherever your position is, right, I want you now to move relative to where you normally would be, right? So for instance, this paragraph here would normally just fall right here, okay? But if I say position relative, I can change its position. I can move it. I can nudge it left, right, up, down, right? So for instance, I can say left 20. But left 20 means that there should be on your left from wherever you fell, wherever you would normally render, well, move, right, relative to that 20 pixels, okay? I want on your left, I want 20 pixels. Make sense? Right? I can also move vertically, right? I can say top, you know, I can say if it's positive, it moves the element down. If it's negative, it moves it up, right? Relative. And notice that this introduces one of our problems, right? That normally the browser would avoid that any elements would render on top of each other. Okay, the browser makes sure that everything has enough width, enough height, right, so that nothing is overlapping any other elements, right? That's the default behavior, right? But when you start moving things around and you start overriding the default behavior, you can run into issues like this, where you are deliberately, you know, changing the calculation, right? And now things are rendering on top of each other and overlapping, whether you meant to do it or not, right? Whether it was deliberate or not deliberate, right? Make sure that in this class, wherever you do, it is deliberate. It is not by mistake. It was not unintentional, right? It's intentional. Okay, so now I have things that are on top of each other. Okay, so this top left, right? So left, there's also a right. Okay, and just like there's a top, there's a bottom, right? Which allows me to move things in different directions. Okay, now you can start seeing some weird things, some weird behaviors, some interesting behaviors if you provide both of them. Notice that I should be able to between left and top, I should be able to move any element vertically and horizontally. I should be able to just put it anywhere on the screen. It's two-dimensional, right? I only need 2 dimensions, right? The X, which is left, right? And the Y, which is top, right? But what if you provide also, I could have also used right, right? And bottom. I can move it horizontal with right, and I can move it vertically with bottom as well, right? And so instead of left and top. But actually, CSS allows you to provide both of them, right? So that's kind of weird. What happens if you provide both left and you provide right? And this is actually a really interesting behavior, right? I can say that left 0 and right 0, right? And what I'm doing is basically I'm stretching, right? I'm stretching the sides. I'm anchoring the left on 0, and I'm anchoring the right on 0 as well, which the end result is as if it were 100%, right? I'm kind of stretching and taking up the entire width of the screen, which is pretty cool, right? Or I can maybe do left 10 and right 20. Maybe I want to leave some space on the right, right? And some space on the left, okay? Okay, yeah, so yeah, we have position. We just showed you position relative, right? Which is moving the position relative to where it would normally be, right? But there's also another value for position, which is absolute, right? So an absolute allows you to specify. I'm not looking at the chat. Let's see the question on the chat. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I can't see the chat. If there were questions on the chat, I'm wondering if did it crash again? Oops. Ah. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I for some reason I can't see the chat. I don't know if you had been asking questions. It's not rendering for me. All right, let's continue.
We can see your screen, but I think we've been looking at the same page. It's
Which
still the styling relative position.
relative position, huh? Okay. Let me restart Zoom. Be right back. Oh my God. Let's see, there's a couple questions that I had not seen. Let's see. So spans are inlines and divs are blocks. Yes, exactly. So the position is only to move the elements within its box. And no, you are moving the box itself. Right? So the position is only to move the element within its box. You mean the parent box? It's within the parent box, right? But you're removing the box itself. Let's see. Okay, let's see. And I believe I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, so we saw relative position. Now there's there's also absolute position, which allows you to move the XY position, but not relative to itself, right? Instead, relative to the outer surrounding box, okay? Which in this case, right, the surrounding box is the window itself, right? The computer window itself, right? So you can move where the 0, 0 position, right, is the top left corner, right? And so any positions is measured against the surrounding screen. Let's see, any question on the screen? How is margin different from left and top? Yeah, so left and top allow you to move, right? To move the position of the elements. Obviously, margins, what it does is that it automatically calculates for you the position, right? So basically with margins and paddings and things like that, you're telling relative, you're telling the algorithm that's calculating the positions how much space do you want between elements and whatnot, right? And it'll make its best not to overlap anything. But you can override that. You can override and says, well, no, I know you're trying to make sure that nothing overlaps anything, but you can override it by using the positioning attribute and exactly put things wherever you want it. Okay. Obviously, you can achieve just with position XYZ, you can achieve anything you want. But padding and margins are just abstractions of that, so you don't have to calculate exactly what you want everything on the screen. Okay. All right. So position absolute. Notice over here we're calculating and we're moving it 50-50 position between this corner. I think the corner is here, the window. So it's 50-50 from this corner over here. That's the beginning of the document over here, like that. Right. This is the rectangle. And so it's moving it left and right. Same thing over here. We're moving also 30-30 from the corner. And so here we have two paragraphs that are overriding each other. Okay. Or there's also position fixed, right? And what position fixed does is that it tells a piece of text or content to stay in that position, right? No matter what. This one, and this one, right? If you have a lot of content, if you have it doesn't fit in the page, you'll still have a scroll bar, right? If you move the scroll bar, the whole content will move up and down. Okay, right? This heading will scroll up and down, and the content will move along with that scroll bar, right? Because the 0 here on the document is also moving up and down as you scroll up and down, right? But you can achieve some really nifty behavior if you use position fixed. What position fixed does is that it puts the element and then it just doesn't move, even if it has a scroll bar, right? If the rest of the content doesn't fit, right? Notice that all these two paragraphs over here, they don't fit, right? So they create this really, really long piece of content, right? That turn on the scroll bar, right? When you start scrolling, the paragraphs will move, will scroll up and down, right? But the heading will not move. It will be fixed in its place, right? It won't go anywhere, right? So that allows you to do things such as, like a menu or some toolbar that you want it to be always there, and even as you scroll through the content, right? You want the toolbar always maybe stuck to the bottom or stuck to the top, right? And as you scroll the rest of the content up and down. Question says, so is position fixed how you stick a nav? Yeah, exactly. That's how you would do it. Yep. Right. And the assignment asks you to do that. So you will have a chance to play around with that again. All right. So float. So float, we'll see that float is how we are going to be able now to lay out things that are in horizontal, right? Next to each other horizontally, right? And by default, right, HTML is mostly laying out content vertically, right? It'll put the heading and then the paragraphs, right below it, and the divs, blah blah, right? Only small pieces of content like text, right, flows from left to right, right? But for instance, what if I want to put things in a grid, right? Or I want to make two columns, right? There is no default way of doing that. I mean, you could achieve it using tables, right? If you use HTML tables, right, you can rows and columns and whatnot, but that's considered to be a bad practice. You should not use tables for that task, right? For that goal, right? Instead, tables should be exclusively used for tabular data, right? Where you have headings in the columns, right? And then you have rows, and each row, right? It's kind of like a record in a database, right? Where each field has the same data types, right? There could be addresses or phone numbers or emails, right? And each row, right, in the same column, you have the same data types. That's what tables are for, right? You should not use tables for layout purposes. Instead, you would use CSS, right? And we'll show you how to lay out things in columns. Okay. All right. So take a look at that. So notice that we have the example here. We have a heading and then two paragraphs, one below the other. But you can achieve columns by floating right? By floating. Well, first of all, we're going to make the paragraphs smaller, like by 50%. So we're going to have them both be the same width, right? Now without the float, they would be below each other, right? You would just have a paragraph which is now narrower by 50%, and the one below it is also another paragraph, also by 50% narrower, right? But they still would be one on top of the other vertically. But by saying float, what it does is that it removes the behavior of block. Okay, it says you're no longer behaving in the block layout, right? Meaning you're no longer going to take up the entire width of the screen, right? And you're going to allow things, just float to the left-hand side of the screen, right? So the first paragraph is going to be on the left-hand side, which it's already in the left-hand side, right? And the next one is also going to float up to the left-hand side as well. But it can't float all the way to the left, so it'll just bump into whatever is already there floating to the left, right? And so that allows us to create things like this, where you have two columns right side by side, right? Which is pretty cool. Okay. Or you can go a little further. You can have, 3 paragraphs and have them be a third of the width of the page, 33%, 33%, 33%, right? So they're all really skinny, and then floating, and then it'll float one after another, right? So that allows you to lay out things in columns. Okay. All right. Everybody good? Any questions? All right. All right, let's keep going. Let's take a look at the assignments to get you going there, and we can start playing around with some of the content there. Okay, so here's the next assignment, A3, and so this will be due next Thursday, right? So a week from tomorrow. All right, so let me present it to you. So this is the intent of this assignment is to give you a chance to play around with CSS. Okay. All right. So like all assignments, they have three sections. They have the practice sections, the build section, and the challenge section, right? So the practice is going to be a very much a handheld. I'm going to hold your hand through several examples. Right? I'm going to ask you to copy and paste content and verify whether what we did is what you just copied that it's behaving the way it's supposed to be behaving. Okay. In the build section, you're meant to apply what you just learned in practice, right, to build something, right? And what we're building is a clone of Twitter, and we're going to be using all the assignments. Throughout the assignments, we're going to be adding just a few more pages and whatnot. Okay. And then the last section is the challenge section, which is required by the graduate students, right? That you explore some other additional things that if the undergrads, if they want to practice some more and play around with some of those contexts, it's not required. You can go and explore on them just to learn a few other things, but it's not required. Okay. Whereas it is part of the grade for the graduate folks. Okay, so let's see. So let's see what we're being asked to do. All right, so we're being asked to use the same project that we worked on last week, right? The same React.js project, which I believe we called it webdev, and you had already worked on assignment number 2 under a directory called A2, I believe it's called. Okay, and so we're going to copy all that content A2 into a brand new directory called A3, so that we bring forward everything you've done from assignment number 2 and bring it over to A3, and then just keep working on A3. All right. So under A3, you're going to create a dedicated CSS directory where you're going to do the work for this practice, right? So you're going to have the HTML here, and you're also going to have the CSS here. The HTML, because you copied it from A2, is going to live here, plus you're gonna have a new CSS directory where you're gonna do your work with index.html. Okay. Yeah, so it's gonna ask you to play around first with the style attribute, and then with the style tag, and finally with the link tag. Okay, and then after that, right, you're asked to make sure that you only use the link tag. Right. So let me demo this quickly for you. And let's see if I can bring the IntelliJ. Oops. Ah. Okay. Nope, not that. I believe it's this one. Okay. I might have started some of this already. Let me close this up. Okay. All right, so I probably going to ask you to create a dedicated HTML document and also a dedicated CSS document. Okay. All right. And then just play around with a couple things. Now, I'm not going to do the style attribute. You know, it asks you to style just a box, right, using the style attribute. Then it asks you to do the same thing with the style tag, and then it allows you to do the same thing with a link, right? I'm going to skip over that. It does tell you to comment out at the end what you just did using the style tag. Don't use that, right? And instead, just stick to the link tag. Okay, so I already have that set up. Notice that I have my index.html and I have my link there referencing my index.css. There it is, my index.css, which is this one right here. Okay, and this is where we're going to do our work. All right, so let's run this, see what this looks like for now. All right, so I had a couple of boxes here. I was playing around with Flex for one of the assignments. In the practice section of the homework, is the practice section of the yes, please complete that. Obviously, it'll have a little less percentage than the build, right? The build, you're going to be working from scratch, right? Whereas the other one, I'm pretty much giving you the entire code, right? It says, do we have to copy the practice directory? Yes, just please everything, copy everything over. Oops, right there. Okay. All right, so let's go over a couple of the examples here. Link tag and link tag. Okay, ID selectors. Okay, here we go. So let's start off. So I had shown you the selectors, right? Where you we had shown you the example where the selectors were classes, right? Yeah, I guess it helps. I guess there's some value of going over this a little bit, right? So for instance, let's create this right here real quick in HTML, and right here. Let's see what that renders as. There we go, right? So we have a cascading style sheet, style attribute, right? And there's the content right there, which is to be expected, right? And it renders as prescribed. Perfect. But a better solution is to use the style, right? And instead of using the attribute, so I'm going to copy that. Notice that the style tag needs to be done in the head tag, right? So it's part of the head tag, right? So if I copy this and I come here, I'm going to comment out the link because presumably we're not using the link just yet. And so here, instead of using the style attribute, I'm going to remove that and instead put it in my head. There's my head right there. See that? So in the head, I'm going to paste my style tag, right? And so what is the, how is this, I moved, this used to be part of the attribute here, and we moved it to the style tag. And so how do we relate that it used to be here, but now it's over here? How do we relate these two things, right? So I had shown you earlier that we were using classes. Here instead, we're using the name of the tag. See the tag here, P matches the name of the tag. So there's many different ways that this syntax of these selectors, remember, these are called selectors, right? The left-hand side of a CSS rule, this whole thing is called a rule, okay? On the left-hand side of the rule of the curly bracket, it's called a selector, right? Is meaning allows you to select or reference things, right, in the DOM, right? So this is referring to all the paragraphs. So all paragraphs should have this background in this color and this foreground color, right? So that's why this paragraph is going to render as blue. So if I go here, if I render it and I refresh, notice that indeed, right? Notice that indeed it is white over blue. Okay. And just to make sure, if I say red, notice that indeed I am changing it. Everybody good? All right. All right. So let's go on to the next assignment, the next example, right? We could, instead of having it in here in the style, what we're going to do, I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to comment this out. And instead, I'm going to comment the link back in. Very good. So inside of my index, I can now put all my transformations, all my rules. There it is, right? And this should still work. This should still work now, right? If I go back and I render it, notice that this still works. If I change this to green, right, and I refresh, notice that indeed it is green. Okay, so it's working, right? But it's outside. It's a file that lives outside. So this is the best practice. This is how you should go from now on. All right. Now, the selector can be all different types of selector. There's the by name. So this sets the value for all paragraph, right? So if you have multiple paragraphs, let's say I had another paragraph, right? I say paragraph, and down below I have another paragraph. Right? Notice that now both paragraphs are going to have exactly the same style because this rule is applying to every paragraph, right? So how can I be a little more specific? Right? This one is too broad a rule, right? It's applying to all paragraphs. Maybe I want some paragraphs to be blue and some orange and some yellow. Okay, so how do I do that? How do I target individual elements? Yeah, so to do that, one way is to use the ID selectors. Okay, I can give each paragraph a different selector, a different ID, right? So I can give the first paragraph, I can say this ID selector 1 or this ID selector 2. Okay, notice that this is still going to render the same way because my rules applies to all paragraphs. Okay, but I can say now that the rule might apply only to, now the way I reference IDs, right, is by using the hash sign. Right, see that hash sign? My IDE is so smart, right, that already knows that there's an ID called ID selector 1. So I can choose it from here. There it is. See that? Right now, if I render, notice that the green is now being applied only to that one paragraph, right? Whereas I can have a different rule for a different paragraph, right? Which applies to maybe selector 2, and this could be red, right? And now I can target each one individually. Make sense? All right. Now this is we call this in databases, we would call this a super key, right? Notice that an ID by definition is unique. So all by itself, the ID is unique, right? So really, I don't even need to put the P there, right? It makes no sense to say that this particular paragraph, right, has an ID. Yeah, of course, right? You can only use an ID once, right? And it's unique. There's no need to even put the paragraph, right? So if I re-render, notice that it renders just the same, right? So this rule says the paragraph whose ID is ID selector 2, right? Which is the same thing as just saying the ID number 1. selector number 1, right? Regardless of whether it's a paragraph or whatever, right? Okay. So let's continue. Everybody good? Okay, so IDs are fine, are just okay, right? But in general, we're going to try to stay away from IDs. Okay. Instead, right, we're going to be using almost exclusively, we're going to be using class selectors, right? Because I mean, there's not really anything that the ID selector does that a class selector can't do the same, right? And so let me just show you. All right, so let me create here an index. In the index, I'm going to paste this, right? So I'm going to put it. Let me put it up here like that. Okay, so class selector. So it's basically 2 paragraphs. No, I'm sorry, a paragraph and a heading that is using the class selector. Is declaring a class, right? And notice that it's the same class selector. See that? So unlike the IDs, classes can be the same, right? You can have an element that has a class, and you can have another element that has exactly the same class. Okay. And so now I can say selector 1 and this selector 1, right? And let me take that class selector and apply it in my CSS. So go at the top, and I just changed the example to 1. See that? Okay. And so if I go back and I render this, right, notice that it's basically applying it to both, applying it to the paragraph and applying it to the heading of size 4, right? This heading over here. So I can make it maybe a little bit bigger. There it is, right? So this is a heading tag, and this is a paragraph tag. So the paragraph is going to be smaller text, right? By both are being applied the same transformation of a background yellow and the foreground blue, right? So one of the cool things about class transformations that are using class as the dot, right, is that it allows you to apply the same style across multiple elements all at once, right? If you want something that is specific, right? So for instance, in class selector 2, right, that only applies to one element, and maybe the background color here is blue and the foreground color is yellow, right? You can have maybe a different paragraph right below it, right, that has class selector 2, right? And there it is, right? Yellow on blue. Okay. So this could be, if you are rigorous, you could treat this as if it were an ID. You just have to remember not to use that class ever again, right? Within this page, right? As opposed to an ID will force you to be a yes.
The screen is stuck actually again.
Screen is stuck. Okay. Let me restart. Okay. All right, can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so there it is. So I targeted this one element, right, with a specific class, right? I just have to, I can use it. If I'm rigorous, I can make sure that this class never gets used again, right? It's only applies to this one paragraph. Okay. Yeah. So in general, we're going to be using just classes from now on. And, there's nothing that you can do with an ID that you can't do with a class anyway, right? So we'll get, it's just to simplify it to be this way. All right. All right. Okay, let's keep going. You can also use the structure of the document, right, to write your rules, right? So for instance, say you have this complex document, right? Let me copy that, and let me put it here, call it H3 or H2 document. Oh, I can just copy that, paste that. Now, if I go back and I render, let's see what we get. There it is. So it's just a document structure selector, right? And some content, okay? And notice that it has a structure. The structure is that we have a div, which looks like it's a parent element, a root, where all the other content is inside the selector one. We have an H3, and then we have an embedded H2, right? A div that is inside of the selector one. See that? It displays some content, and then a paragraph that is inside of the selector two, right? It has this class selector 3, and then a span, which is also inside of selector, the P selector. See that? So basically, we have like a tree where the root is the selector, and then you have one branch, another branch, and then another branch down below, like nodes like that, one instead of the other. Well, you can write your rules in such a way that you can take into account the structure of the document, right? Your rules can be written so that they can traverse this hierarchy, they can traverse this tree, and then specifically, bind to a specific element on the tree, a specific branch or node on the tree, and say, hey, I want that specific span, right, to be a specific color. Okay, so let me show you how. Right, so here, right, we have the selector one, right, selector one, and notice that selector two is a direct child. So selector two is a direct child of selector one. See that? And notice that selector three, this selector three, is not a direct child of selector one. See that? It is a direct child of selector two, but it is a descendant of selector one, right? It's like a grandchild, okay? And selector four is a great grandchild of selector one, right? It's two nodes away, right? So selector four parent is selector three, and selector's four great parent is selector two, and selector's great grandparent is selector one. See that? So there is a parent-child relationship between all these folks. Okay. Well, you can specify what do you want to do with what element, right? So for instance, let's copy this here. Let's copy this into the CSS at the top, right? What this says, this rule says, is that starting at selector one, okay, and then this space here says what that space between, you have two classes here. You have two classes, and because they're declared in the order where you have selector one space selector three, what that means is that this transformation applies to any element that has in its ancestor selector one, okay, but it has it's definitely being applied only on selector three, right? On elements that have the class selector three applied to them, but not all of them, right? Not all selector three are going to have, only the ones who have selector one in its ancestry. Okay, right? So obviously it would be this one, right? This one. So if I don't have selector one in its ancestry, then no, it would not apply to this, right? So let's see what happens here. So I'm saying that selector three is going to be red, right, and color white. Let's see if that is true. It's this one, right? That this paragraph is red, background is okay. Let's see if it's true. Let's render that, and there it is. This paragraph is background is red, right? The background is red, and reference as follows: selector 2, selector. Now, what happens if I change this and I say, selector 11? Notice that this is going to break. It's not applying to it. See, it doesn't apply to it. It doesn't work because this says it only applies to selector 3 if it has as a descendant, or I'm sorry, in its ancestry, selector 1, right? Okay, that's why it only applies to that. But if this is 11, right, then this applies again. See that? All right. Same thing with selector 2, 3, and 4, right? I am making a relationship between these three, but notice instead of a space, just a regular space, I'm using a greater than. See that greater? What greater than says is that these have to be in direct descendancy, right? A direct child. So selector 4, which is this one over here, down this selector 4. So this transformation applies to selector 4 only if selector 4 is a direct child of selector 3, and selector 3 is a direct child of selector 2. See that? And that's why this is blue foreground and yellow background. Okay. So if this instead becomes like 33, then it doesn't apply. It doesn't work. See that? It doesn't work at 33, right? Because I broke the chain. Okay. If instead I change this to a 3, then this should work again. All right. Well, I broke the entire example, but you get the idea. All right. Any questions on that? All right. So let's keep going. Let's see. Let's take a look at color. Right. We have foreground color. We have background color. Right. And that can be either you can specify colors as names of colors like color black, white, yellow, brown. There's a plethora of colors, right? And if you're using IntelliJ, you can easily identify what the names are just by start typing, like gray. See that? Gray. You can say light gray, right? There's light blue, light coral, light cyan, light green, light gray. And notice that it gives you the color also in hexadecimal code, right? Hexadecimal code is also if you're using IntelliJ, it gives you kind of like color picker where you can choose the value from a color picker, and if you select it, it'll replace it with the corresponding hexadecimal code. Okay, which is pretty cool. Anyway, you can choose that. You can use that. You can change the foreground color. Here, I'm declaring a whole bunch of colors that we can use later, right? So, for instance, if we apply these colors here. Right, and then we use this in the index. Okay, then there's the colors, right? Foreground color, and then red and green, and right, declaring these colors right here, right? Black, white, blue, red, green, right? And then I am applying them as classes. See, I'm applying the blue here, I'm applying the red to this paragraph, and then I'm applying the green to this span. Okay. Yeah. All right, so let's see, background, so that's color. Border, I'll leave that to you. You can change the how fat, what styles, dotted, dashed, things like that. Margins, you can move things inside, right? So this allows you to play around with that. You can change the rounded corners, right? On the bottom, on the right, on the left, you could do all sorts of pretty cool things. Dimensions, you can change the sizes of these three divs, right? And you can also change the positions, right? You can change them in relative to one another, or absolutely, you can put them, around what its parent div is, right? And once you start having things that are rendering on top of each other, you might say, well, why is the red on top of the blue, and why is the blue on top of the yellow? I mean, who decided who goes first? Well, the default behavior is that the order in the document, how it was declared, defines what gets rendered on top of what, right? So for instance, since we declared first the yellow and then the blue and then the red, right? So the last one is going to be on top of the previous one, right? So that's the default behavior. Okay. Fixed position. This one's pretty cool. So you can change you can set the position. So we can set it here, right? And then we can fix the position in the CSS above here. And so we can set that and maybe, where is it? Oh, no. Did I not use the correct naming? Position fixed, and this is position fixed. Oh, there it is. Oh, I didn't declare any of these classes. These are classes that I had declared earlier, and I never declared them here for this example. Oh, sorry. You have to do my examples. You have to do them in the specific order, otherwise they won't work. Okay. All right. So when you start seeing elements that are rendering on top of each other, right? You can start just overriding that, right? Says, well, I don't want the red to be on top of the yellow or on top of the blue, right? So you can override that by now making not only an X, Y position, right? But you can also declare a Z, right? How far into the screen you are, or from how far away from the window, right? So you can do that by declaring the Z index, right? And the bigger it is, then the more on top it'll be on top of other things. Yes. Float. We play around with float, putting things floating left, right, to create columns, or floating right, and we push images on the right hand side. And then we actually use the grid, right, to play around and create a layout, right? We see that we can lay out things either side by side in 2 columns, or maybe have like a third on the right hand side and a left 2/3, right? Or declare them kind of like 2 sidebars and then a main content in the middle, right? And finally, so now we ask you to play around with all these styling. We ask you to apply this, right, to build a clone of Twitter, right, where we're going to have you build these 2 screens, the Explore screen and the Bookmark screen. Right. So now the requirements, I'm using these letters here, right, to specify what I'm asking you to build. Okay. So for instance, I'm asking you to build this input field over here. I'm asking you to use this image and then these tabs with a particular color and the border down below, right? I'm asking you to put these border colors all around, right? Use a particular color for the font, and the background to have a specific background, and have some images and some rounded corners, right? And I also specify the distance between these here, any padding, any margins, okay? So all that is specified here in the on the requirements, and on the right-hand side is a wireframe picture so that you can use. Now these numbers here, right? Do a best effort at making it look at what it looks here on the right-hand side. If the TAs see that more or less it looks like what it's shown here on the wireframe, they're not going to go into and check to see if it's exactly 12 pixels, right? Or if the color is exactly this RGB, right? They're not gonna go that far, right? Only if they see that just by looking at it real quick, it really doesn't look nice, and it doesn't really look what it's the wireframe is here, right? Then they're going to start looking in, with a magnifying glass, right? So if you make an effort at making it look as close as possible to what you have here, then you should be good, right? You shouldn't be, oh well, you say it's 13 pixels, but it doesn't look exactly like the wireframe. So again, if it's not 13 pixels and it turns out to be it's 14 or 12, that's totally fine. You're not going to lose points for that, right? Just make a best effort at making it look as close as possible to what's here on the wireframes. Make sense? All right. Okay. Any questions?
Hi. Can I actually ask one question about the assignment 2?
Assignment 2. Yes.
Yep. So I've gotten like all of the requirements done, and it looks how the assignment shows, but I'm just worried. Like I noticed like for some things, like if we're creating a field for where we can like edit our username, like does that need to be in a form tag as well
No,
as, okay, I guess I'm just, so as long as it's replicating on the surface what it's looking like, it's okay if like
Yeah.
we don't like label the IDs and stuff. Okay, it doesn't have to be, okay.
yeah, no. Yeah, as we start using JavaScript, more and more we're going to ignore the use of the form tag. The form tag has a specific default behavior from legacy use, right? When we used to actually submit a form using the browser, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to use straight JavaScript. We're going to parse the content. We're going to create a JSON object. We're going to encode it and send it over using Ajax. So yeah, no need for that.
Okay, and just one other question on that. So
Yes.
going back to my example on the edit profile portion, so the last portion for the deliverable, one of the things they have, yes, right here where it's name web dev. So do we need like a label tag as well, like for what it is, like the purpose is for?
Well,
So
it does
that's how we
say
get the name.
Well, it does say name label associated with an input field, right?
Okay, all right, awesome, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
that
the
answers
field
my
should
question.
have a default value and the
Yes.
name as a placeholder, right? So if I type away web dev, name should appear, right? And notice, look, it even says, right, if you click on the label, the input field should get focused, right? So the rubric, right, just to let you know, the rubric is literally the text that is here, right? And for every single sentence, it's like a point, right?
Okay.
So the rubric literally says field should have blah, 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 blah as a default value, 1 point. It should
Okay.
have name as a placeholder, 1 point. If you click on the label, the input field, 1 point, right? So literally is the text point by point by point by point.
Okay.
So if you follow these literally, the rubric will have some leeway, right? So for instance, if you don't actually use the text web dev and you use something
Yeah.
else, if you use something else, you won't lose points, right?
Okay.
Right. So there is some leeway. So if you don't actually type lorem ipsum and use some other text, you're not going to lose points for that.
Okay. Sorry for all the questions. I just
Oh
had
no,
one
please.
other.
At
Okay.
all. Go ahead, please. This is
Yeah,
definitely
just
I'm sure it's useful for other folks too.
okay. Yeah, one other question on so when breaking some of the things up, I'm using like HR tags in order to do that.
Yep.
Is there any like style that we should follow? So for example, if I have an HR tag after this choose file, should I have that on a separate line or should I have that right after the choose
Yep.
file tag? Is there something
Yeah.
we can use in our IDE to do the styling for us, or?
No, so the IDE, if you ask the IDE, it will put everything on a single line.
Okay.
And the only thing that it might do is that it'll wrap when it gets to 80 characters. But actually, if you have multiple things, such as you have an input, right, and you have an ID, whatever, right, and you have a placeholder, and you have a value, right, and you have a class, right, all in one line, it makes it really hard to read.
Yeah.
So best practice is to put everything in a single line, right? So
Okay.
each
Yeah.
attribute. I'm not gonna penalize you for this since I didn't ask you to do it. But in practice, for when you're in an industry setting, right, this makes it so much easier for other developers to read it, right? That, oh, I
Yeah.
see all the attributes one line at a time. As opposed to if it's a single line, I have to scroll all the way to see what the heck you're asking me to do. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
whatever you could do to make it easier to read, definitely go for it.
Okay, great. And on this example, the ID that we use here, the 1, 2, 3, that's not for any purpose other than just identifying that input field.
Well, here the use of this ID is needed for the label. The label, when you create a label, right? You'll say a for,
Okay.
right? And then you can relate this with
Oh,
the
yes, that's
this,
right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
now
yep.
this
Forgot about
label
that.
is associated with this input. And actually, I think there's a question on the quiz on this. So
Okay, and that's why when we click on name within the edit profile,
yep, exactly.
even if we don't click on the box, it needs to. Yep. Okay. Great.
Yeah, it
Thank you.
grabs focus. Yep, yep. Excellent.
Awesome.
Even here,
And
right? You would put this in separate lines like that, to make it easier to read.
okay, that's kind of the convention there. Okay, great. And if I wanted a break line at the end of this input, would I put that on the or I would put it underneath the input?
Underneath, yeah, underneath. Yep.
Okay, great. That's what I've been doing. Awesome.
Yep. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Great. And I just had one question on the quiz. So I know you're going to be sending out a poll. Would that new time, if we get one, would that be applied to the quiz 1 as well, or should we prepare as if we're taking the
Yeah,
quiz tomorrow?
you should prepare as if the quiz is tomorrow. Worst case scenario.
That's what I thought.
I'm gonna try to see if I can have everyone agree that I don't know, maybe it's Saturday at 5 or something, or if everybody can agree that it's on Saturday at 7. I don't know whatever the poll is gonna say. I'm gonna ask everybody. These are all the time slots, and wherever most folks can fit in there, then that's where we'll go.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for answering all my questions. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I'm gonna have office hours now. So if you have questions, please feel free to, I'll just stick around as long as you need.
Professor, I have a question about the quiz time.
Yes, go ahead.
Is there any reason we can't have it asynchronously? Because I think a lot of us probably have different schedules.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's on the table. So when I do that, oftentimes I have folks are going to have a question on the quiz, and I'm not going to be able to be there and answer it. That's my only concern. I mean, if folks are okay with me not being there or the TAs not being there and be able to answer questions, then I mean, I guess I'm fine with that. And I guess that'll be part of my poll. If folks decide, you know what, it's better everybody go synchronous. I don't care if you're there to answer questions. I can figure it out. Then yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's the boat that I'm in, because already tomorrow I'm having scheduling conflicts. So
really, okay.
And this is the first quiz, so yeah.
Right. No,
okay.
that's why I was saying that I was gonna try and find a time where everybody can be at, right? And if there is no time where I can get everybody to agree, then perhaps we'll just do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll look out for the poll.
Yeah.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Can we go back to the homework 3, like
sure.
Practice part, the fixed position part?
The fixed position?
Yeah, because
okay.
Because the code you given is wrong, right? Can you show us?
No, the code is good. The code is good. The thing is that it depended on position fixed, and yeah, I was looking for dimension, square, and a color, blah blah blah, which I did not have, but we can fix it. It's okay. Let's do that. Let's see. We had oops. Where did I put fixed? Fixed. There we go. Fixed position, right? And this is my div here, right?
Yeah.
Background blah blue. And so do I have that background blue? So background color blue, I'm guessing. And foreground color white. I think I have that. Foreground color, yeah, white. And dimension square, I imagine that would have to be width 100 pixels by height 100 pixels, I'm guessing. And foreground color, blah, 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 blah. Position fix. And position fix, I have it here. whichever isn't fixed, right is 0, bottom is 50%. Okay. So let's see what we got here. Okay, there it is. Okay, there's my fixed position. Notice that I'm scrolling,
Oh, I see.
right? And just this stays, the box stays regardless of how much I scroll up and down.
I see. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Professor,
Yes.
just had a quick question actually about homework 1. So
Homework 1. Yep.
yeah, so I joined the class, after that assignment was due, and I'm sure a lot of other people may have joined the class a little later. But I just submitted a homework 2, and the site for the Netlify app is, I think it's updated because of the stuff that we did in assignment 2, and
Yeah.
so I was wondering like how that is really going to work because like in terms of like grading.
Yeah. So the assignment 1, once you finish assignment 1, it should work, right? It should have the default React app application, but then assignment 2 right away asks you to break it.
Right, exactly.
Right? That's fine. Don't worry about that. Once you provide the Git repository, and we see that it's just the default React application with a package JSON and the Git ignore and all that, we know that this would deploy fine on Netlify. In a couple weeks, we're going to reconstitute and get this working up again, and then obviously hopefully it should automatically start deploying right away.
Okay. Okay.
So you'll get a full credit for assignment 1. Even though the TAs might have not had a chance to actually see it running on good faith, right? That
Right.
you have this, you gave us a Git repository, you gave us a Netlify, and presumably if you have a Netlify URL, this actually deployed correctly. And we'll know in a couple weeks when we reconstitute this as a fully React application.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thanks, Professor.
All right.
Professor, on that note, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I, updated my Git with the most recent assignment 2. I mean, it's still a React app. This doesn't have the React components to it, so it deploys. I can see exactly what I would see if I did like npm start. So I'm not quite understanding what's like, oh, it's going to break.
Well, so some folks, what they did is that they commented out the entire index.js under the React, because they, just to get it working locally. And once you deploy it, once you commit that into Git, that gets deployed to Netlify, and that could break your application. If it doesn't, that's great.
Okay. All right. So okay, that's better.
That's even better. It depends on how folks got their local index.html to work. So I know some students had to comment out the entire index.js file.
Okay.
Which definitely will break their React.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
A follow-up question, so after we finish the assignment 2, after we've pushed it to the GitHub repository, the deployment to the remote server will be automatically done. Can I? Oh, so we do not need to do anything else?
Yeah, no. Once you give Netlify authorization to log in to your Git repository and do a clone and do that, it will create what's called a webhook. That it will be notified whenever there's any change to that repository. So if anybody pushes or anybody commits to that repository, it will automatically clone down and just do the whole redeploy process again.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank you.
Sure.
And just on that, can we do iterative pushes? So like I modify one file and then I do a commit message. Just okay.
Yep. Okay. Oftentimes you don't want to do that until you are comfortable with having tested and make sure that it's working locally. But once you feel confident on what it is that it's working locally and satisfies your quality requirements, then certainly push right away so you don't lose anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Professor, I have a question about some terminal commands. Like with VS Code, I can't get it working with IntelliJ, and I don't really understand why. Like, I just can't do run HTML. I can
really?
with IntelliJ, like I'll do run HTML or run whatever, and the paths just won't work, if that makes sense, even though it's like the correct path. But so I've been using like VS Code, and that works just fine. But I've only been doing like npm start. Like, do you have to do npm run build before that? And what exactly? And like
no, you don't need to do that. And npm start will do npm build. It's only if you're so I believe Netlify does that, right? Netlify will do a npm build for you, and basically what it'll do is that it'll grab all your HTML, all your CSS, JavaScript. It'll compact it into individual files. So all your JavaScripts, even though you might have 30 files, it will compact it into a single JavaScript file. Same thing with all your CSS. If you have like 3, 4, 5, or 10 different CSS file, it'll be munched up into a single CSS file. It'll compact it really, really small, removing all extra spaces into its small bundles, right? Just to optimize for when the browser is going to download it, so that the file sizes are really, really tiny. But that's only like if you're going to do physically your deployment yourself and move things file by file. But Netlify is doing that all for you. You don't have to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Professor, I have one question.
Sure.
With respect to assignment one, there was one requirement that we have to include .idea extension in the gitignore file, right? But that is only required for people who are using IntelliJ, not for people who are using VS Code or any other editor, right?
Right. So correct. Now VS Code has other files, right? Like I think it creates a .vs something, maybe even a directory with a couple things in there, doesn't it?
So for me, it did not create any other temporary files.
Oh, really? It didn't. Okay. All right. So right. So if you're not doing IntelliJ, then I think you might have lost points for not putting something in the gitignore, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll remove that as a requirement, and I'll give everybody points for that back.
Yeah, and there are no other extra files committed on GitHub as well.
Let me make a note of that. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just said that there are no extra files committed on my GitHub as well, like any other VS Code temporary files.
Yeah. So make sure that there's nothing that is specific to your development environment. None of that should go in there. Yep. Especially node underscore modules. But if you had created the the application with create React app, it should have already added node underscore modules in your gitignore. So you shouldn't have a problem with that.
That's already there by default.
Yep. So you shouldn't have issues with that. Excellent.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
So I have 2 quick questions, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes, go ahead.
My first question is sort of about assignment 1, but kind of not. So when I tried to create the IntelliJ project, my folder for node modules and idea don't show up. Is that a problem? Like, everything seems to be working. Just when you look at the left-hand side where it says webdev and then public and then A2 and then practice, I don't have a node modules or an idea.
That's weird. No, they should be there. Are you sure
And
you're
if
in the right directory, or are you hiding those? Because that git ignore is a hidden file. So it might be configured not to show it. But definitely node underscore modules should be there. Could you share your screen? I'm curious.
Yeah. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try again.
Okay. Share. All right, so you should be able to see.
I don't see anything yet.
Okay. How about now?
No.
Uh-oh. Maybe I need to try again. Stop share, screen share.
Oh, maybe I have to stop sharing. Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
Okay, I stopped sharing. Can you try? There we go.
So what are you seeing?
Okay, I see the public. Close the public. Close public, EMV. Interesting. Can you stop the project down below? Control C.
Yeah.
How did you run it?
I did npm start.
Yeah, so if you do Control C, it should stop. Okay, say yes, terminate, yes. Okay, do an ls here. Okay, now do a dir. Okay, can you make that bigger so I can see? All right, there it is. Node underscore modules is there. Dot idea is
We have
there.
idea and node modules, but they don't show up here.
Yeah, so I guess your ID, your IntelliJ is configured not to show those files. Interesting.
Okay, but they're there, right?
They're there, yeah. So that, yeah, this would not be working if you didn't have the node underscore. It doesn't matter, idea doesn't matter, but definitely node underscore modules should be there.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that it's configured not to show build directories.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then my other question is just, I can't come to class tomorrow because I have another class. So if the quiz ends up being during class, how should I reschedule that? Or how should I?
The worst case scenario, the ATA will set up a time on Friday so that the folks could go there, or you could organize or coordinate with a TA to take the quiz. But again, I'm gonna either try to find a time where everybody's available, or we'll just go full asynchronous.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. Good luck.
Professor.
Thanks.
Yes. Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. So I had a doubt. In the folder structure, there is a file named robots.txt. Like, I was wondering what that file is.
Robot.
Robots.txt.
Yeah. So that's useful for search engines like Google or any other search engine that is automatically goes and visits different websites, and you can specify in there that you don't want your website to be indexed, right? And so you can list the different spiders. They're called spiders that just they visit the entire web. That's why they call spiders. And so you can say, hey, Google, don't index my file, my website. You can put it at the top, or you can also put specific directories that you want the spiders to go into.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Professor, I have a question regarding the quiz.
Sure.
So you said that it'll be better if the quiz is during the lectures because we'll be able to ask clarifying questions. So what you mean to say is that while attempting the quiz, we can ask questions related to the quiz?
Right. If you don't understand a question, or if there's something ambiguous, or if you find a mistake or something misspelled, and it's going to cost you to answer the question incorrectly, I think it's better if I'm there or TA's there to clarify the question. Or right, I can make the question so clear that there's only one way to interpret it, and then we just call it a day, and then you don't need me there.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
Professor, I have one general question. Can't we have our MCQs without any time limit? So it will be better to ask questions on Piazza, and after the answers, we can continue our quizzes. It's just a general question. I'm like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's already we're finding it hard to make sure that folks are doing the quiz on their own and whatnot, and so we need to strike a balance on being able to have everybody whenever they actually can, but then making sure that you are working on your own. If you have it all day, I don't know, that would kind of make it somewhat pointless.
okay.
So I would have to make the quiz so much more harder. What I've been toying around with is random quizzes that folks don't get the same quiz or have slightly different quizzes, so that there's no way that two people would have exactly the same answers. But I'm not there yet.
Hey, Professor, I have a question, just a clarification. Can you explain one more time what that span tag does?
Sure. So just like you have tags that deliberately add vertical spacing, like headings and paragraphs, right? They contain content, and what they do is basically they add vertical spacing, right? Without the paragraphs, the text would just flow into each other, and there would be no ever any vertical spacing, right? And so that's why you put content inside of a paragraph, and now you have some spacing in between. So span is the opposite, right? The opposite, meaning if you surround text with span, it does not add vertical spacing, right? It just leaves it the way it would render as if the span was not there. Okay, but what it allows you to do is to text that would normally flow any which way it would go, it leaves it alone, but it allows you to say, oh, well, these 3 words, right? I want to highlight them, right? So I want to change their background to be yellow, right? So what it allows you to say is it allows you to grab content, group it together, right? And then apply styling to that group of text, okay? But keep the flow that the content would have had anyway, right? So it's an inline. It leaves it inline, whereas div and paragraph modifies it from inline, modifies it to be block. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense now. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, so is it right time to start with the final project based on the document specifications which we have, or we should wait a little more?
Yeah, I meant today to go over the requirements for the project. This was the final project. I don't know. I'm not sharing my screen. Am I? Yeah, I meant to go over it today, but I guess we'll go over it tomorrow. And this is the final project requirements. And so yeah, so we'll talk about this in detail tomorrow. And it's never too early to get started in the project. At least to get started on deciding what it is that you want to build, who you're going to be working with. It does ask you to access data online, so you need to go and fetch, see where what data you're going to be using and whatnot. Yeah, so it's never too early to get started.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. All right, if there are no questions, then thank you, everyone.
Professor, I have a quick question.
Sure, what's
I
up?
just wanted to show you some of my code in the homework, so I could hang back after, because I wanted to share my screen. It'll only be a
Sure.
few minutes.
No, you can share your screen. It's fine.
Let me see. So the question I had is like, you know, when we create the border, I think it's the first section in the build. Like there's like a 2-line border versus like for tables, there's like just one hairline. And I was just wondering, how do you make it where it's just like one hairline? Because the example used was like 2 hairlines for tables. Here, let me see if I can share 1 second.
You mean the borders of the table with a beveled,
Yeah,
beveled borders?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the default rendering, and different browsers will render it differently, and so we're going to abandon that when we start using. Yeah, that's the default, and that's how it's supposed to render. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because in the homework it had like single lines, so
Yeah,
it's
no,
okay if it's like this.
I actually didn't use HTML to render my table. I believe I used Google Docs table thing. So this is actually how it's supposed to be.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah, we're gonna style this later with CSS and make it look pretty.
And it's okay not to have rulers, right, in the homework, because I think you had like these ruler indentations.
Actually, I think what the assignment actually asks you to do is to only render the right-hand side there. See that those bullets?
Yeah.
Home, explore, notification. That's what I believe you're supposed to just build, not the table itself.
Oh, I see. All right, whoops.
Yeah, that's why it says browser. See that browser?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it means. That's what the browser that's what the browser should render.
So then this stuff is so I just only have like one column
Just
that just says
right, you're
browser.
not even a column.
Okay.
Not even a column. It's just a list.
Gotcha. I didn't understand that. Okay, I'll change that. And
sure.
Let me see. I think those are some of my questions. Yeah, I think we answered some of my other ones.
Yep. Sure.
Thanks.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
A quick question about, is there any difference when using the BR and BR slash for the line break?
For the line break, BR?
Yeah.
Yeah, what about it?
I saw on the practice code example, they always use the BR slash.
Yeah, right. So you should always use BR. Are you asking whether you need the slash at the end or not?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, you always need that slash. That's called a self-closing tag. And like for instance, the input is also an example of a self-closing tag. So you have the input, right? And then at the end, right, you'll have a slash at the end. And so that's required. You have a self-close. Otherwise, you would open up a BR, and then the browser would say, well, that's an opening tag. Where's the closing tag, right? And so BR don't BRs and input and images. All those are examples of tags that don't have a body. So they don't have an opening and closing. It's just have the opening and closing. It's the same tag. So there's the opening and then the slash at the end. So it's a self-closing tag.
So for the assignment 2, when we try to keep all the thing vertical, we should also use the BR slash, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because I tried the both way, but they work the same thing.
Yeah, because the browser's just being nice to you.
Okay, but we are supposed to use the BR slash.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
yep.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right, anyone else? All right, if that's it, then let's Alvin, if you want to join me on the private We can chat some more.
Sounds good.
So can you I'll start my my private Zoom channel. Do you have that?
No, I don't.
Well, I guess we can stay. We can stay in here. If everybody can drop off. Thank you so much. I'm gonna hang out with Alvin for a second. Something private. I'm gonna stop recording.